Good morning on this Sunday, August 18th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The federal judge in the lawsuit over Georgia's voting system says it's too late for paper ballots this year. She lost the race for governor, but Stacey Abrams is all over the airwaves launching what she calls Fair Fight 2020. Plus, the first test results are in, showing high levels of a dangerous gas in the air in metro Atlanta. Well, Alexis, Theron, Phil, and Janelle Jones are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Perhaps a win for both sides in the legal fight over Georgia's current voting system. Federal Judge Amy Totenberg minced no words when she ruled the state cannot use the machines come next year. The plaintiffs in the suit wanted Judge Amy Totenberg to order an immediate switch to hand-marked paper ballots. She declined, but had no compliments about Georgia's touchscreen machines, saying, quote, Georgia's current voting equipment, software, election, and voter databases are antiquated, seriously flawed, and vulnerable to failure, breach, contamination, and attack. Judge Totenberg made it clear she's not ruling on the wisdom of the state's chosen replacement, a touchscreen machine that will print out a paper ballot with a QR code that a computer can read, but a voter cannot. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger welcomed the ruling, saying, quote, these activist plaintiffs continue fruitlessly attempting to force their preferred policy outcomes on Georgia voters without success. If the new touchscreen machines with the paper printouts aren't ready by the presidential primaries, the judge says Georgia will have to use hand-marked paper ballots. Now, we would like to welcome Janelle Jones to the show. She's a Republican and co-founder of Speak Georgia, which is a series of political town halls and kind of kitchen table talks, and that's exactly what we do here at the Georgia Gang. So welcome. And I'll start with you on our main story here. The plaintiffs say that the new system is not much better than the old one, and they won't be happy until they use the hand-marked paper ballots. What do you think about that?
Oh man, I do not want to go to hand-marked paper ballots. I think that it's going to create another problem. And to be honest, while I do believe that the voter suppression conversation is a bit of a political talking point, I welcome anything that's going to open us up to creating a pretty much a healthy environment around voting. I do think that, having the new machines and, being able to do that will, open that up for us. So I'm kind of excited about that. And anything that takes Georgia from being the state that, steals elections, apparently, I think will be good for us. So, but no paper ballots, we have to get this together.
Fair, and this is just something that we debate all of the time on the show, but what do you think about the new machines?
Well, I think what the judge said was that she expressed basically her unreadiness, of not this sort of disdain that this process is kind of carrying out the way it is, and that there was really not a huge level of confidence in these current voting machines. And so I think that she was sort of forced to kind of go with what we have. But the bigger question, Lori, is that will Georgia be ready in the presidential primaries? And more importantly, will we be ready in 2020? And I think a lot of people are saying that if we keep up this track, you noted last week that we rolled out voting machines that had not even been tested. And so this is not going to, what Alexis has been saying for a long time, making sure that voters feel that their votes are counted properly and that they are secure. And we do know there were some voting irregularities. There's been some voting problems while it is left up to the county and the state to work together. But let's not act like there were some things that were done that others have pointed to that could be characterized as voter suppression.
And Phil, the judge was very careful to say, look, she's also not saying that these new machines are great and are okay. She's not giving her approval on those. There was so much confusion about the rollout. You got some clarification this week on what the actual printout will be.
I did. For the new machines, you will actually have a, it's going to be audited, which I think everybody likes, but you'll have a barcode on there that they run through the machine if they have to do a recount.
That's what gets counted,
we
not
trust,
the names.
And in barcode we trust is the Secretary of State's motto. But I will say it's good that we're going to have a test period. We've got some municipal elections in Fulton County and Atlanta and elsewhere. I think that'll be a good thing to see how this is going to work. So Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger actually has had a fairly good week this week as opposed to the week before. The judge did kind of have a split decision here. Yes, there's been some deficiencies which are being corrected by the Secretary of State's office that weren't corrected before. I think that's one good thing that came out of it. But now, and you're right there, and we've got to see if we're ready for 2020.
Right, it's one small step, but we need a giant leap into the 21st century and let people vote online. I mean, you bank online, you can vote online, and then you can do it any time of the day. that the voting period happens. So that's where we really need to go.
I think the critics would be really upset about that, and they would say, you know, what about safety? What about security? Because there's so many hacks right now. There's cybersecurity issues.
Have your bank ever been hacked? Your banking
My
account?
credit cards have been,
but not your bank account.
Well, some have.
But one of the things that Phil has done successfully on the show is that every time we turn to what we saw with some questions raised from the former election, the past election for governor, was that, oh my God, Republicans shouldn't get blamed for voter suppression because they made it easier for people to vote, right? They've registered more people. So I agree with Alexis. I think maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but Georgia has got to explore making it fair and easier for people to vote. And I think we should have an online conversation because in this day and age, yes, we do have cyber attacks, but if it's truly a Republican and Democrat goal to make sure that we have fair elections and it's more accessible for people in Georgia, we should have that conversation.
And I would add one footnote to that. As we see, 159 counties control the elections, and there are problems like in Fulton County and elsewhere. So we got to make sure that all the counties step up, whether they're Republican controlled or Democrat controlled, to make sure that people are satisfied.
And Janelle, didn't Brian Kemp, when he was Secretary of State, make it easier to register?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. Is that, remember the app that came out where people can register to vote on their phones? And then we still saw the Abrams campaign walking around with clipboards and signing people up with paper voter registration forms, which is what led to a lot of the discrepancies. So I do think that there needs to be an easier way, but I don't think it's online, unfortunately. I just think that we should, well, because I think it does open us up to more hacks. I think we're going in the wrong direction. And then I do feel that people feel secure going into the voting booth and making sure that there are people that are there that can assist when it comes to anything in reference to that. So there can be glitches, and we would hate for people to have those excuses. So I think we do.
But I think you're making an argument for why we should, to resolve what you're saying and what we're saying, just go to a paper ballot. I mean, you're really kind of saying, okay, if we can't be a 21st century state and utilize technology, and then because there's a fear about it's going to be compromised, then you're kind of making a point that we may just need to go to a paper ballot, which from what I just heard from the judge is something that could possibly happen in Georgia if this Secretary of State is not ready on day one.
So at one point, are you going to have to use the machine because you're going to have to scan them into a computer, right? So at some point, unless we're going to actually hand count all the ballots.
With the hanging chads and whatnot.
Well, and as you know, there's a whole new set of fraud problems with paper ballots. So, you know, you got to pick one or the other, and that's why I like the testing period. And then we'll have this conversation after a few months.
And that's why we need to go vote online.
Well, I think eliminating one form of technology as the online option, it doesn't mean that we can't use technology at all. So I do believe that, yes, while there is a use for technology, I think that we need to make sure we put certain parameters around it that will help us, again, alleviate some of the excuses that's been made.
$100 million. I just want to keep emphasizing that. Taxpayers, we all pay taxes in Georgia. We are on the books for paying $100 million for a new voting machine that it's got striking similarities to the past voting machine. And many have said, not me, that it's somewhat obsolete. So if we're going to spend $100 million on old, kind of obsolete technology, I don't think there's anything wrong with exploring how to use technology in a secure way to make it more accessible for people to not only register to vote and vote.
The new machines were certified, and I would point out that the $100 million is a lot cheaper than what was originally budgeted, so that was good.
But I thought we were trying to cut wasteful spending. I think we're trying to trim
we
back.
We saved money.
Yeah, but,
right.
but there were some cheaper options that were presented.
You went cheaper?
No, cheaper as far as price tags. As far as price tags, not cheaper as far as the time. Look, I agree with Alexis. I have evolved. I think we need to explore
and
online
also,
voting.
it should be automatic registration when you turn 18. They know who you are. They know when you were born. Just get registered.
How do you verify? The Democrats never want to have verification. Yeah.
Well, I am glad we solved this problem. Okay. Well, coming up, she's not going away anytime soon. Stacey Abrams announces her plans for the immediate future.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Democrat Stacey Abrams announced this week she won't run for president, is open to a VP slot, and is expanding her Fair Fight group to 20 other states. Phil, she was also all over the airwaves this weekend. In an interview on MSNBC, Abrams said a recent ruling will allow Republicans to cheat and lie and go into polling places and scare voters, that they'll send in off-duty cops to tell people their votes are being monitored. Where is this coming from?
Well, it's a vicious accusation. It's part of this myth that somehow Republicans are trying to suppress people, and especially in Georgia. And I've talked to Democrat friends here in Georgia where Stacey Abrams has actually lost some points in her approval rating since last year's election because she's really hurting the image of the state of Georgia. There's absolutely no proof whatsoever that she's talking about. Plus, just as a political note, and I'd like to hear my colleagues chime in, I would like to know, if I was the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party, I would want a vice presidential candidate that maybe is from a state that they could flip, maybe a Trump state, maybe like a Klobuchar, Amy Klobuchar. So I don't know if Stacey is really vice presidential timber.
A lot of folks are saying, though, Georgia could be a battleground state next year. But Alexis, weigh in on this. Do you really think that Republicans would just lie and cheat, try to steal the election?
Sure,
Is that going over the line?
That's what the president is doing right now. He lies and cheats every day and steals. What are you talking about? I think that that's certainly a possibility. And since the Voting Rights Act was gutted in 2013, the Republican Party across the country has done changes to make it more difficult or trickier or harder for people to vote. And right here in Georgia, the Secretary of State, who was on the ballot, changed the ruling about the signature match. And the courts threw it out. Then the legislature comes back, the Republican-led legislature comes back and passes it as a state law and reinstates it. And lots of, over 1 million signatures votes got thrown out.
Janelle, though, this type of speech, this type of talk, does this really kind of rile up Republicans?
Absolutely. I think, you know what, so let's just be clear. The voter suppression is her platform. That is exactly what it is. It's a political platform. She's running for office, and that is what it is. So when I hear that, I know. I worked with the Georgia GOP. I was behind the scenes during this last election. I know the countless hours that were put in from volunteers and great Georgians who went and knocked on doors, they made phone calls to millions of people in order to ensure that the Republican Party won. So I think what it does when she says that is it kind of negates all of the hard work that was put in. And the Republican Party has been known for putting in really good infrastructure when it comes to election and campaigning. And so I wish she would just focus on issues and not necessarily continue to use voter suppression as her means of talking points to continue to keep her face out there as she's getting ready to run for something.
But Theron, you know, she's expanding Fair Fight to 20 other states.
Listen, one thing I've said about Stacey Abrams is that she has found a unique way to continue to push this issue, because voter suppression is an issue. Let's not, gloss that over. But she's now taken what she's successfully done in Georgia, has gotten on the cover of Vogue, I saw this week, and did a national, interview on another national newscast. And so I think what now is her intent is to say, look, I'm going to take what we believe happened in Georgia, because she believes that there were some things that happened. I'm going to take it to other 20 states. And these are going to be 20 states that I think are going to be pivotal to Democrats trying to flip or win or retain in the upcoming presidential election. And I think also, listen, to still be sort of making news about making a decision not to run for president and then to sort of push back and say, hey, I'm still considering vice president, it just keeps her along the national narrative. And to answer Phil's question, look, I think, the problem in the Democratic Party right now is, you can't even pick a nominee, so let's not get ahead of ourselves and start talking about a VP nod. But we do know that if she were chosen to be vice president, she could activate the most loyal wing of the Democratic Party, which are African-American women. And so they vote consistently with the Democratic Party. And if she was on the ticket, or even if she's not on the ticket, and she stays involved in the national conversation, I do think she has a role to play.
Phil, last word on this?
Yeah, it's the Stacey Abrams money machine, vacuuming off as much money as she can now into 20 states. And it is a vicious lie that the Voting Rights Act has been gutted. That is actually not true. It's still intact. A Section 2 section, let me finish. Section 2 was tweaked because in various states that have proven to the Obama Justice Department, as well as this Justice Department, that there's no discrimination. There was no need to go hat in hand to the Justice Department to move a polling place from one block to another. That's all it was, a technical change, and you know that.
And since then, dozens of precincts have been closed all over the country.
And to libel the president and to call him criminal is a shameful.
I didn't call him criminal. I said he lies and he cheats and he steals.
Well, stealing is a crime. And that is shameful. That is shameful.
He's not been convicted of anything.
We are going to move on because suspended insurance commissioner Jim Beck, facing more federal charges, another count of mail fraud, and 4 counts involving false tax returns on top of the accusations that he bilked his former employer of $2 million to help fund his campaign. He's still getting a state salary. Janelle?
Wow. Well, so anytime these type of allegations come out, it is definitely hard to digest, right? But I do commend Governor Kemp for suspending him and putting someone else in place so that we can continue to move forward, because there are other issues that we need to address, and there's a job that still needs to be done. So it's unfortunate to hear what's happening, but I do feel like we need to kind of let the justice system do it. Does what it does and hope for the best.
Theron, do you think it's time for him to just resign?
Well, I think that the governor should be commended for stepping in, but let's not, again, let's not sugarcoat it. These were some very, very damaging charges that are alleged against this statewide insurance commissioner who voted, was on a Republican ticket. And so one of the things that you got to look at is that you got an insurance department that is out here combating the fraud that we know is going on every single day in our state. And so it really now, I think what the governor's office is probably looking at is that whoever, whoever goes out and basically tries to restore confidence from the voters that this agency is doing what it's supposed to do. So, look, I'm not in the business of telling people that they shouldn't go through the legal process. I'm really big on not rushing to judgment, but these charges are pretty significant and they're pretty serious. And it may be helpful at a point in time to really explore the opportunity of just stepping down, because as you noted, Laura, he's still right now, and I'm on this whole my tax dollars.
$120,000.
We're paying his salary right now. So.
All right, we'll wrap it there. Coming up, Georgia officials do a first air test for high levels of a cancer-causing chemical. Why the results have outraged some officials.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The Georgia Environmental Protection Division has just announced an air quality monitoring plan for the areas around 2 Metro Atlanta plants that sterilize medical equipment. Now, the move comes after reporting from the AJC that Georgia's first air test for ethylene oxide shows levels way above what federal officials have deemed acceptable. The EPA says ethylene oxide does cause cancer, and many are pointing the finger at those companies. Phil, I want you to weigh in here, because we have been saying all along, where has the EPD been?
Absolutely. I think all of us are upset about the lack of action by the state EPA. And I also think it's upsetting and sad that Smyrna, where the Sterigenics plant is nearby, is in Cobb County, and local officials are having to pony up money which could be used for other services to try to fix this. And of course, Smyrna is going to be doing some independent testing, which is good. But I spoke with Cobb County Commission Chairman Mike Boyce. He said, this is a state and federal problem. We're going to step up. We're going to be funding it. And let me say this is a good example of some bipartisan work on everybody involved. Everybody wants the right thing and to in the name of public safety.
Right. But Theron, the EPD had this information for a year. They didn't release it. It's taken weeks for them to come out with this kind of statement that they are going to monitor the air. I think it's every 6 days for a few months to see, what these folks are actually breathing in.
Well, Laura, we talked about this. One of the things that the company made a mistake is that they were sort of self-reporting, but that information was not getting out to the constituents that was surrounding. That was number one mistake. Number two, I think that we know the EPD had some funding issues that I hope now that they've resolved. But we've been saying for so many weeks on the show is we need an agency that can independently monitor not only the success that hopefully they're implementing out there, but not trusting this company to voluntarily self-report. And so I'm very happy that the EPD has stepped up, but it's still very concerning to me because it's not just, again, Smyrna, it's everyone in this sort of 29 county radius. And so we should be outraged by this, and I think this company should go above and beyond, which I'm hearing that they're doing, but it's very good that the EPD has stepped up and make the information public.
Janelle, do you think the EPD got a call from the governor?
You know what? I sure hope so. I know this is something that is really important to me as I live within the radius that is affected. And I believe that, when you start focusing on issues that cause long-term damage, it makes it a very complex issue, because now we have to do these long studies to make sure that we are actually seeing that this is the direct link to it. But I am happy that something's happening. I hate that it takes so long, but I certainly am happy it's happening, and I hope the governor did jump in.
All right, moving on.
Good.
Both Democratic candidates for U.S. Senate in Georgia say they would support a bill that would study giving reparations to the descendants of slaves. Alexis, why don't you weigh in on this one first?
As a descendant of slaves, I would say that it's definitely an issue that needs to be looked at. I mean, hundreds of years of work with no pay, and then 100 more years of discrimination with laws that kept black people from making equal access and everything to have an equal chance. And I think the biggest problem is just poverty as a result of the years of enslavement. When you're free now, so go away. That was basically what happened. Well, and one other thing I would say is maybe people say they weren't there, you know, it's not responsible. But I was there for Jim Crow. I was there for segregation. A lot of people still are here who were discriminated against because of the color of their skin. And something needs to be done. I agree with that. Look at it.
Janelle, do you agree?
So this is a very interesting topic. So while I do believe that that America was built on the back of slavery, we've all agreed to that. I do not necessarily agree with the reparations argument. The reason being is that I feel like it is a long-term goal with a short-term fix. And what I mean by that is that I think as House Democrats, there should be focusing more so on addressing, you know, failing schools, on maintaining the employment growth that's taking place in the African American community, rebuilding the black family, as well as making sure that we focus on investing in small business and entrepreneurship opportunities. Those are the things that will produce long-term benefits, and I think that is the real reparation.
Darren, do you want to weigh in on this? Because some Democrats have really not wanted to touch this issue. Now we see some of them are coming around too.
Well, let's separate the two. So if you look at what the American people feel about reparations, most Americans, I think 67% of them, believe that the House caucus, a panel, should be put together to basically explore a conversation about reparations. And so when you talk about slavery, therein lies sort of the challenge about the messaging from Democrats. But also the other thing is that this is reparations that were promised to them. So this was an American promise that were made to African Americans who descended from slavery. And so it's really, to me, nothing wrong with having a conversation. I think that in lies what the two U.S. Senate candidates were saying and what the presidential candidates were saying is let's have a conversation about it. There are some economic challenges to it, but again, this is something that was promised to these folks and it should be talked about.
Interesting topic.
No one has ever come up with a plan on how you do it. None of the proponents have ever said.
That's why we want the panel.
I understand, but isn't it a waste of time? I tend to agree. Well, let's help people in poverty.
Okay, we're going to wrap it there because we have to get to winners and losers. We could go on and on this topic. Stay tuned for winners and losers, everyone.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Janelle, since you're new, we'll start with you.
Oh, awesome. So my winner goes to my fiance, Kelvin. His company, Osprey Management, made the Inc. 5000's top fastest growing 5,000 companies in America. He came in at 1,405, so I'm so happy for him. So congratulations, honey. And then my loser is Teen Vogue. I have to give them the loser vote. They create an article that's entitled "How to Get an Abortion If You Are a Teen," and I felt like the Teen Vogue is a platform that's good for young women. So we need to focus on empowering women and not creating loopholes.
Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to salute Fulton County Commission. They renamed a library in honor of Joan Garner, who was the late commissioner who served the District 4 up until the time of her death. And the library is under renovation right now. When it reopens, it will be the Joan Garner branch of the Atlanta Fulton County Public Library System on Ponce de Leon near Ponce City Market.
All right, Darren.
I agree totally with Alexis. Definitely Commissioner Joan Garner dismissed, and that was really good to do by the Fulton County Commission. I also want to give a big shout out to the city of East Point. They're going to be hosting a restorative justice job fair and a misdemeanor expungement record restrictions efforts in city of East Point. Also, a young lady named Charisma Bell. She's going to be attending Xavier University in the fall. But check this out, Lori. She went to Woodland High School and had a 4.9 GPA.
Wow.
And so she is definitely one of my winners.
I didn't know you could get a 4.9.
And then lastly is the Republican Congressman Steve King, who credited our existence to rape and incest. So definitely want to make him my loser.
Phil.
I've got a winner. We lost, the law enforcement community lost a giant in Washington County Sheriff Thomas Lee. He died tragically this week. And also, I think my winner will be Governor Kemp and his budget cuts. You know, it's not so much cuts. You got to be careful of cutting services, but you got to reprioritize. In fact, since 2010, the state budget has grown $11 billion. It's incredible.
All right, thank you guys. Well, my losers, sheriff deputies in Saluda, South Carolina, for arresting Georgia's Southern quarterback Shea Wertz. Now, they arrested him for speeding and possession of cocaine because of a white substance they found on the hood of the car. Guess what? Turns out that white substance, in Shea's words, was indeed, quote, bird doo-doo. It's really infuriating and disgusting to watch the video of this arrest. So my winner is Wertz for keeping his cool. You got to hear the audio on that. It's unbelievable. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Janelle, for joining us, and we'll see you next week here on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.